I just did the Narrows, fell flat on my face in the water innumerable times. Mungo Woodifield serves as the Minister Counsellor for Trade and Global Issues at the British Embassy to the United States of America. He's in Washington, D.C. He is responsible for overseeing the UK government's work across the United States on trade, economic security, agriculture, energy, climate, environment, transport, science, and technology. Mr. Woodifield has had many important roles, including several in London at the UK Foreign Ministry, working in Sudan as a journalist, and holds a degree from the University of Cambridge and the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Thank you so much for joining us on this cold day. It's an interesting time for renewable energy, and we'd love to tell our audience, for starters, about your role at the embassy and how it intersects with renewable energy.
Hi, morning, Kathleen, and it's a real pleasure and honor to speak to you. The work that Earth Day has done over the years is truly inspirational. So it's just fantastic to have this opportunity to talk about the UK's commitment to the climate, to the planet. So my role here at the embassy, I'm the Minister Counsellor for Trade and Global Issues, which is a long and slightly unhelpful title. But in that position, I oversee the work of our embassy, but also my colleagues who work across the United States in the various other consulates we have in America on energy, climate change, technology, trade, science. So a whole range of issues that actually come together quite often as one on the question of climate and renewables. And I should say I'm a career diplomat. So I spent 10 years in my career in two different periods at the United Nations working on some of these issues from that multilateral vantage point. So it's something I've been very fortunate to work on for a long time. And the UK has obviously made international climate a sort of priority for a number of years. So it's something that we're very proud to sort of talk about and advocate.
I'm on so many listservs, and I read reports every day about investments in renewable energy and what percentage of each country's getting from renewables, what their plans are. Yeah. Maybe you could tell us what the current domestic renewable energy landscape looks like across the UK, what types are prevalent, how much of the national grid are they feeding, and percentage of overall energy needs. And today, and you could also sort of launch into the future if you want to.
Yeah. So, I mean, to start off on sort of politically, we had a new government who came in last July, and they have made climate and reaching net zero one of their top 5 government missions. And specifically within that, and I'm sure we can come on to it, this goal to achieve clean power by 2030. And that we have a lot to do, but actually you asked the question about our current energy mix. And I'll start off by saying that the UK's electrical grid was the cleanest ever in 2024, with sector emissions falling by, I think it's 2/3 over the past decade. So we've made huge progress. And the exact number, I have it here, is that it's a record low of 26% of the UK's electricity is made up from fossil fuels, and renewables hit a record high of 44%. For us, wind became the largest source of electricity in 2024 for the first time ever, accounting for 30%. We then have gas at 26%, nuclear 14%, biomass at 7%, and then it goes down to 5% solar, 2% hydro. I think one of the other things that we're particularly proud of as a sort of commitment to what the government is doing to support this drive is last year the UK became the first G7 country to completely phase out coal-fired power generation. And that's the end of, I think, a 142-year era of coal in the UK. So on September 30th, when we shuttered the power plant at Ratcliffe-on-Soar, that's the last coal-fired power plant in the UK. So we're sort of making every effort. We've still got some way to go, but as you can see, compared to a number of countries, 44% renewables in our grid is a good base to start with. But clearly, we have more to do.
Do you see any big changes coming for your 2030 pledge? You do have some goals and objectives out there that are pretty forward thinking? And do you see a lot of movement in the next 6-7 years?
Yeah, so that's certainly the intention. So sort of by way of background, I think it was in 2008 when Parliament passed the Climate Change Act, which made the UK the first country to have a legally binding requirement to hit net zero by 2050. And then within that commitment, as I mentioned, and so that's interesting because it spans different political parties in the UK. It's really something that the country as a whole politically is behind. But within that, the new government has made clear that they want to make the UK a clean energy superpower, and they want to make our grid clean by 2030. And they've done this by, a number of sort of major announcements, and we can sort of maybe talk about a few of those. But I think the first thing is they've set up a company called Great British Energy, and Great British Energy will invest around about £9 billion of its own money and then leverage private sector investment to really make it easier for energy companies to come and build renewable energy in the UK. We've also set up a national wealth fund, which has got about $30 billion of capitalization from the government. And again, it's trying to get about a 3-to-1 ratio of private to public investment. And the National Wealth Fund will work with Great British Energy to really, spur investment into the renewable sector. So they're really trying to set out a sort of vision of Clean Power 2030, and then through these two entities, Great British Energy, National Wealth Fund, find ways to support the private sector investment we'll need to get there. And there's a number of other steps they're taking, which we can talk about, but I think that's the sort of the overarching vision.
Great Britain plays an outsized role, in my view, for your island size, in sort of the importance of energy security and freedom from that dependence, particularly in a world that feels like everything's changing all of a sudden, and it doesn't matter what the cause is, but from AI to everything else. Do you see yourselves playing a role in sort of moderating or assisting countries that you're very involved in, whether it's Africa as a continent or other parts of the world, being able to help countries achieve that energy efficiency or energy independence? How do you feel Great Britain is playing that role? I feel you are. I see you at international events. Yeah. Well aware of all the things you're doing. We're nominators for the Prince William Earthshot Prize. I know that it comes not just from Prince William, but from inside Great Britain. So maybe you could talk about it, because I do see you everywhere preaching the same really effective language and mission to help the rest of the world.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting question, and it's kind of you to say that we sort of as a country are punching above our weight, as we like to say, and I think that comes from a responsibility that we feel as an advanced economy, a country who went through its industrial revolution many years ago, and is now making the transition to clean energy. We want to help others who have maybe not been through that development path as quickly as we have, and want to. And how can we help them get there whilst also pursuing a clean energy transition? And I think there's many different ways we do that. I mentioned earlier having worked at the UN, so there is the kind of international climate advocacy strand of this, which obviously we hosted COP26, and we are always very active internationally in support of the climate agenda, and I think we've just under the new government started a new let me get the name right, Global Clean Power Alliance, which is an attempt to foster international energy partnerships really around sort of specific missions. So there are an awful lot of international climate sort of frameworks which are pledge setting, and very important they are too. What we want to do with the Global Clean Power Alliance is think about what are the specific missions that we need as an international community to deliver to enable all countries to make the transition. And the first mission they've chosen is the finance mission. So what is it that we, with other partner countries, can do to get private investment into around the world to spur kind of the renewable energy transition. So there's that sort of international kind of coordination part and advocacy. I also think there is just something in what we do as the UK with our own development assistance. We've long had a very strong presence in international development. And when we are running programs in countries, I think we're always thinking about the sustainability and what the kind of climate impacts of those programs are. So we're sort of practicing what we preach. And also, to be very honest, and I don't think we should be kind of shy about this, there is an important growth angle to this. You know, the UK government's top priority is to support UK economic growth. You know, we are fortunate in certain sectors because we have been, you know, pushing for a clean energy transition in the UK. We've developed some expertise. There's some real strengths in, you know, offshore wind, for example. And there are opportunities there for British companies to export and to deliver economic growth whilst also supporting countries with their own energy transition. So there's sort of many different ways we're trying to support a sort of global effort on climate.
From our perspective, climate education is the science you can teach in 10 minutes. You burn fossil fuels, we kind of create an umbrella, and all hell breaks loose on Earth.
Yep.
For us, our real goal in climate education is about innovation, entrepreneurship, and jobs, not just for Great Britain and the US, but for the rest of the world. So especially since you're involved in emerging markets, but also in the context of what you're seeing at home, how are jobs, is there a lot of jobs growth? What do you see the future for jobs?
Yeah, look, it's absolutely what the government's thinking about. And the first thing to say is, you know, the UK, I think, is the first major economy to have halved its emissions, having cut them by 50% from 1990 to 2022, whilst also achieving economic growth in that period of 79%. So it's not a sort of trade-off, right? You can do both. And I think the thing that we are increasingly trying to advocate is that investment in clean tech and renewables leads to the sort of skilled jobs that people want in modern economies. And we have some statistics that says in the UK, for every £1 million invested in the nuclear sector, you can expect 5 jobs to be created. For every £1 million in the renewable energy sector, 10 jobs created. And in the energy efficiency sector, £1 million will get you 16 jobs created. And we compare that to fossil fuels, where the estimate is about 3 jobs are created for every £1 million. So we see the benefits in terms of job creation of pursuing this path. And, you know, we've actually seen in practice our clean energy workforce is rising strongly, growing 5 times faster than the UK sort of average job growth between 2020 and 2022. And I think our statistic that we think is accurate is there are already about 300,000 full-time jobs in the UK directly employed in low carbon and renewable energy. And the goal of the government is to add another 650,000 good, clean jobs by 2030. So that would get to 1 million full-time jobs in the UK alone, with our population of around 70 million people working in this sector. And I think, you know, looking ahead, we don't think there is a sort of ceiling on that job growth. You know, our projections show that you can get to 2050 and you'd have, 3x that number. So it's really important for its you know, self-evidently for its climate and renewable energy green transition objectives. But for job creation, I think we need to be really clear that we're not talking about trade-offs. We're talking about mutual benefits of approaching these technologies, investing, and we get some massive investments. You know, the government had an investment summit at the end of last year, and I think the overall figure of investment announced was something around $66 billion, of which 24 billion was green energy companies. So as a proportion, and this is, you know,
it's huge.
We have financial services sectors, creative industries, advanced manufacturing, but, you know, almost half of the investment into the UK announced at that summit was in clean energy, which just shows the potential for growth and you know, jobs that come along with it.
I know you talked a little bit about investment, but how are you directly collaborating with business? It seems like, I don't know, Davos is going on right now, and I'm not there, but reading the sort of themes, it's really interesting how they seem to be integrating sort of that sense of that we're reaching a tipping point, and not that it's all downhill from here, because we're on a seesaw of in and out of climate, whatever. So is your feeling like business is going to drive a huge part of this? I feel that way. I'm gung-ho on business, which is a little odd for a diehard environmentalist, but I do believe they're a giant part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to return to what we were talking about with education, I think there's also a really important piece, which is about where you have got good jobs in some of the legacy sectors. You know, we have fossil fuels in the North Sea. You know, we need to find ways to ensure that those skilled jobs in those industries can apply those skills and what they've learned from that into other, you know, renewable energy sectors. And, you know, we now have an awful lot of offshore wind in the same areas where we used to have offshore drilling. And there's obvious ways in which, you know, you can maybe repurpose that workforce into the renewable sector. The other thing, just on an education, there's always a sort of, when we poll populations, you know, concern for the planet, climate change is always something that polls very highly amongst kind of top issues for younger voters.
Right.
And then over time, you see that, you know, I guess it's just something that happens when we all grow a bit older, you know, economic concerns, jobs, you know, putting, you know, food on the table start to be the sort of political issues that are the number one driver. And I think what's interesting is demonstrating that, you know, there is a continuum between being concerned about the planet and wanting to support clean energy, and then understanding that will also create jobs, and therefore it doesn't have to be something that you know,
trade off
later on. And I think if you look at the tech sector, and getting to your question around business, if you look at the tech sector, you know, the huge excitement that comes around AI and what that's going to do to our society, to our workforce, to our economies. And everyone accepts that there is going to need to be a huge amount of energy to power these data centers on which AI relies. And you've seen the big tech companies recognize that it is not sustainable to be using fossil fuels to power that energy. They need clean energy. And that's something that sort of has grown organically, if you like, from looking at the economy of the future and business making decisions around where they think they need to go, and recognizing they're going to need energy to go on that journey, and that, you know, it's not sustainable to be using, you know, fossil fuels to power that energy. On what the UK government is trying to do with business, you know, the short answer is make the UK, you know, an incredibly business friendly environment. And I mentioned the investment summit that the government held in October last year. I think it applies to all business, but it's particularly important for renewables. We've heard a lot that we need planning reform in the UK because it's difficult to get permits to build things. And so, you know, we're looking at some of the regulatory frameworks we have around building permissions in the UK to enable big renewable investments to get off the ground quicker. And so we're hearing some of those messages and trying to take action on them. And in a more holistic way, in the late spring, summer of this year, we will set out an industrial strategy, which will look at sort of 8 sectors of the UK economy where we think we have particular strengths. And, you know, the green economy, clean energy is one of them. And I mentioned before some of the things that are already out there, Great British Energy, the National Wealth Fund. But I think we'll be looking at other ways that we can partner with business to grow the economy, but also to support our clean energy goals. Because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, government can set the framework, it can set the targets, and it can put in a certain amount of funding. But it's really going to be private investment that catalyzes, you know, the transition in the UK. And so we're really looking to sort of crowd in as much private investment, as we can, and make Britain a place where, you know, energy companies, tech companies that need energy want to come and build. And then, if that model works in the UK, I'm sure we will be trying to share that more broadly with partners around the world.
For me, personally, even though Earth Day started the whole solar panel business on the White House, close to 50 plus years ago, which is amazing. And of course, things start and stop and that kind of thing. But it seems like the train's left the station. But you've been looking at this for quite a long time, for a number of decades. So are you surprised, and where do you see this all going? Do you see it stopping and starting? Do you agree with me that sort of the train left the station and there's just a lot of money going here? Where do you think this is all going to go, and how fast?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the train has left the station, and I think there is an expectation from wherever you sit on the political spectrum, that protecting the planet is something that the vast majority of people, particularly in America and in the UK, agree on. And so, making that transition to clean energy is something that I think we can all agree is going to be just a point of fact of the next decades. I also think, there is something really exciting around the innovation economies at the moment, spurred by this sort of tech revolution around AI. And I think we're at one of those moments now where we look at what we can do on AI, we look at what we can do on quantum, and then suddenly some of the really ambitious clean energy goals of thinking about small modular reactors or talking about fusion and just making renewable energy storage so much more efficient, all of that feels like it's within reach. And there are huge incentives for us to be achieving these goals and these breakthroughs. And so, as you say, there'll be stops and starts, but I think the general direction is wanting to be at the forefront of this technological change, which brings with it the opportunity to make huge acceleration in our clean energy transition. And so I'm sort of optimistic, and there's an awful lot we have to do.
We're always looking for great leaders like Great Britain and yourself to say something or do something around Earth Day. So I'm wondering if you have any Earth Day plans coming up for our 55th, and if not, think about it and get back to us.
We will only be able to enjoy these precious experiences on our Earth if we take care of it. And so, at the government level and, what people do with their lives to try to, protect our planet, is we all can contribute in a small way. And if I'm enjoying it on Earth Day, that would be very fitting. And I hope my government is going to make a big announcement to support your agenda, because it's
we'll
worthwhile.
Be happy to broadcast that around the world. So
great.
Thank you for your time. It was wonderful talking to you, and sorry about the weather, but maybe wait a week and it won't be as cold.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. A real pleasure to talk to you as well.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.